Here to talk about all this now is CBSN political contributor and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist Lynda Tran. So let me get both of your reactions to what Ivanka said at that conference. Leslie, you first.
On the issue of media bias, I think she is directly on point. A lot of people feel, and especially in light of these new information about journalists giving to the Democratic nominee, it's definitely been frustrating, and they feel that they've been savaged by the media. That's something they're going to hear consistently. It's very true, and I think there are definitely unbiased sources that look at journalism and say, are we really being fair? But it's so salacious in terms of the accusations and the types of things that we're dealing with related to Donald Trump. So what is fair? You know, he's taken up all the oxygen, and there is a duty to cover this legitimately. It's just there's so many areas of Hillary Clinton that don't feel that they've been exposed, and I think that's more the frustration.
Although a lot of the journalists who have been who've given to the Democrats have been entertainment reporters, people who don't write about politics. You don't necessarily find a lot of political reporters doing
Everybody's writing about politics this cycle. I mean, it's everything from Entertainment Tonight, and it's just the lines have crossed when you're talking about an entertainer and a reality TV star who's moved into the public arena to be run for president. So I don't think all bets are off. Everybody's held accountable with respect. If you're going to wear the J for journalism, it has to stand somewhere.
Leslie, Lynda, sorry, what do you think?
I think it's fair to argue that probably no other candidate this cycle has benefited more from media coverage than Donald Trump. The difference is now the coverage isn't to his liking, and the difference is now the coverage is focused on some, I think, really legitimate questions about his character, about whether or not the comments he made represented somebody who has sexually predatory, inclinations. And so I think that that's what she's responding to. But there have been lots and lots of analyses about how much free media Donald Trump has gotten over the past several months.
There has been a little bit of that, Leslie, and I wonder, to Lynda's point, the idea that somebody came up with a number. It was astronomical in terms of the media coverage that he got during the Republican primaries, that even other Republicans were saying, look, we're not getting the same kind of coverage whenever we go on in the campaign trail. So to Lynda's point, is there bias in both ways in that sometimes it benefits the candidate and sometimes it doesn't?
There's very fair. There's an old analogy. The media is always, it starts off, at your knees and it's working its way up to your neck. So
I've never heard that, but that's good.
That's very true.
Yeah.
You got to be very careful as a public figure, as people that worked with candidates, in terms of this interesting relationship with the media. You want to be close, but there's this proximity. We always say proximity to someone is the enemy of hero worship. So there is some validity to that. What closed the money gap for Donald Trump was the social media gap, his prowess in being able to generate a lot of media scrum and to follow everything he was doing. It changed the dynamics. Look at the $100 million spent by other Republican potential contenders. There was really a waste because it was traditional money that was raised. So yes, but now we're talking about the last kind of the analysis of these candidates and our own bias. That's what I think Ivanka's talking about, the individual bias, because there are many in the media that feel that they did not really accurately portray the true Donald Trump, in the primary, and they're feeling like they need to do it now.
They need to do it now. Although, Lynda, there are a lot of journalists who will say, look, I can be a Democrat or I can be a Republican, but I'm an objective and fair reporter when it comes to my journalism. That, in other words, journalists are citizens. They have the right to vote. They have the right to do all those things. But when it comes to their reporting, they look at, and this is the thing, a lot of people are saying, look, they're only starting to make this charge, Donald Trump's campaign, in the wake of that Access Hollywood tape, which is his own words. And so what, is the media not supposed to report what that tape? And I get it, that the NBC may have held on to it longer than they wanted to, or perhaps they had a plan to release it at a later date, but do you agree with that? I
mean, look, he's the Republican nominee for president. He's making news. I think it's incumbent upon news media to actually cover what's happening. And as you point out, the fact that that tape broke, it would have been irresponsible not to actually focus on it, given the things that were divulged as part of it.
I'll give, if we can, every time. Like, for example, Mark Burnett, who was the executive producer of The Apprentice, people said, well, naturally, he's going to release the tapes. No, he's not going to release the tapes.
Right.
So they were making saying a position, but he's an evangelical Christian who supported Democrats.
Right.
So there wasn't a fair analysis. It was like, oh, he's holding them to protect Donald Trump. Oh, no, he's not releasing additional tapes because he really wants to see Hillary Clinton in. That's the type of bias that Ivanka's talking about. I would assume that she's talking about.
I want to let you finish on that thought, but I want to play some more sound from that. She was also asked about her father's claims that the election is being rigged. Here's what she had to say about that.
The Trump brand all along has been very much about winning, and I understand that you hope and expect your father to win. Do you think it's important for the country and for democracy for him to concede if he loses, and will he?
Well, look, my father is in this to win it. And, you know, I'm not interested in talking about alternative outcomes. And of course, I think my father will always do the right thing. That's the type of person he is. But when you asked me before, do I think it's rigged? I think from a media perspective, it's very hard to get an accurate portrayal of who he is as a person or the business he's built, his professional accomplishments. It's borderline impossible. In large parts, we've stopped even trying with a lot of the mainstream publications because they just don't. You know, I was going crazy around a year ago, calling these reporters, trying to get them to at least hear our perspective, and it's just a waste of time. You fall down such a rabbit hole with this, and it doesn't yield a result. But to your point, if he'll either win or he won't win, and I believe he'll accept the outcome either way.
All right, guys, we can discuss whether or not there's media bias when it comes to the coverage of Donald Trump. We can discuss whether or not he's been unfairly or inaccurately portrayed in the media. But can we get bipartisan consensus that the United States Democratic election process is not rigged at the level that the Trump campaign is suggesting? Leslie?
Absolutely. It's undisputable because we believe in the fair transfer of power and the democratic transfer of power. And we're the gold standard when it comes to that. That's the reason we have so many election surveyors that go around the world and they're called from the United States. So definitely. Yeah, but you're right. There is an argument to be made on media bias, and there's an argument to be made about the dramatic decline in the public has in terms of trusting the government to do what's right. So that's why this is really a toxic environment for this discussion. There's just not, only 19% of Americans, according to NPR, actually trust the government. And so the media is complicit in that. They tend to believe the media is probably even lower in terms of trust.
Lynda?
I mean, I totally agree with everything that Leslie just said. I think it's a basic tenet of our democracy that when you win, you accept the fact that the person who lost is still going to be part of the conversation, and when you lose graciously. I don't know that we can expect that. I mean, one thing I would say about what Ivanka Trump just said is she's in lockstep when it comes to messaging with Mike Pence and with Kellyanne Conway, but I'm not sure that she's actually saying what her dad has been saying on the trail. I mean, he's trying to whip people up and disputing the results before they ever even occur.
It doesn't sound as if the Trump campaign or Ivanka Trump in these remarks has any proof. That's the thing that I think a lot of people, it doesn't make it true just because you repeat it over and over and over on the campaign trail. The real danger here, though, is that for a lot of people who, I mean, Donald Trump the other day suggested that people, if you talk about media bias, right, Donald Trump suggested that people should get their news from the internet. I mean, come on.
Or his Twitter feed.
Or his Twitter feed.
Right.
I mean,
What is fair about that? I can't believe I'm sitting here defending this, but what is fair about that is that it's a direct line of communication in terms of grassroots outreach. You hear direct. That's what social media did to change and empower it. And Republicans and Democrats have optimized the use of digital technologies to directly communicate with their tribes, so to speak. That is a good thing. That's not the filter of the media. That's the reason there's so many conservative publications, is because they felt that there was bias in the editorial rooms and everything, and in the questions, and that is very
But even if you can go straight directly to the folks using social media, Leslie, I just think that if you're going to call it journalism, you need somebody. You are arguing that the editorial guidelines are perhaps biased, but you do need somebody looking over a reporter's shoulder to say you can put that out there or you can't put that out there. Right. Because just putting it out there doesn't necessarily make it journalism.
Correct. And I'm a big fan of social media, of course. Maybe not as big as the one and only Leslie Sanchez, but
you are the queen of social media at CBSN.
I do think you have to start with some basic facts. And if we're going to talk about the system, he needs to acknowledge the fact that it is incredibly decentralized. In fact, there is not some, big boss in a back room saying, okay, this is exactly how this is going to go. Individual localities run the election. So it's I think, such a far stretch to say that there's going to be a problem.
We also live in a country where they say, like, vote early and vote often. I mean, this is not this is not new. There's 100 ballots already in the box in Chicago.
Yeah.
These are really kind of the folklore, but
and
in some
tongue-in-cheek,
cases,
right?
tongue-in-cheek. But there was some validity. All the dead people on the rolls that are voting, all the people you can't really verify. Now we get in big debates about voter ID and do you actually have to show identification if you're voting? There's a lot of things that can be done. And now we're all this talk about tampering with the system because it's all cyber attacks and some of these other things. I'm wondering if the real argument when he's saying rigged is that the whole thing that we learned from WikiLeaks, the collusion, the conversations that were happening in back rooms that did not give a fair shake to the democratic process in terms of the Democratic Party and Bernie Sanders being at a disadvantage. That kind of rigged versus the boxes are stuffed, the ballot.
That's not
you
the
guys have
argument
worked
he's
on
making.
campaigns, yeah.
He's saying Hillary Clinton's going to steal the election from me, and he's talking to those millions of people who believe him and think that everything is entirely broken, and he's trying to incite them to be upset about it. And I just think that's bad for America and bad for democracy.
Inciting them to turn out. I mean, it's a tactic. That's not one I don't agree with, but it's actually a fundamental tactic to move people to the polls.
Except for that behavioral science tells us that when you tell somebody that their vote is not going to count, it depresses turnout. Across the board, it depresses turnout. So if you tell your supporters, don't bother, basically, because it's going to be a rigged election, that's exactly what's going to happen. It's no wonder that the latest polls about the enthusiasm among his supporters show a drop from 90% to 70%. He's making people less excited to come out and support him.
I think fundamentally we still will see a surge of 9 to 12 million additional voters because it's an open seat election. People will turn out. Millennials, I don't know how much. Latinos, probably not the numbers that we'd hope. But his base of support, the only thing we can account on is they've been evangelists for him, and they will ride this to the end. And I really do think he's speaking to them.
I hope our viewers are able to hear that over those planes that are just roaring above us. We will keep reminding you that I'm looking at the control tower right now behind the camera. It is right there. There are planes that are just going to be flying all day long here as we anticipate this. And one last thing, about the social media.
That was a Hillary plane while I was talking.
There was Hillary plane trying to drown you out.
Yeah,
Hillary is controlling that control tower over there, making sure planes fly over us here.
This is why people suspect.
Donald Trump talks about going to social media. Look, he put out on Twitter that his supporters should go and look at the sex tape of Alicia Machado. He was asked about that at the debate. He said he never tweeted that, but he did. And a lot of his supporters believe that. So anyway, we're going to keep breaking this down all throughout the day. Leslie Sanchez, Lynda Tran will be talking more about you and with you, not about you, with you throughout the day.
That's on social media.
It's those planes.